based on capitalism, patriarchy, and racism. And they think that their rights are more important than yours. You are less deserving of human rights and advantages. That is the baseline of what narcissistic abuse is, while it is a combination of these privileges. I'm going to explain to you through 3 different stories how all of these nuances interact, which will clear up a lot of the confusion around narcissism and narcissists, with awareness giving you much better tools to respond to these relationships while embodying power. This video is going to dispel the myth behind what you call narcissistic abuse and the behaviors and signs of narcissists. Good girls look for ways to deal with the narcissist. The bad bitch understands human power dynamics. If you keep calling somebody a narcissist and you're trying to figure out ways how to deal with them by watching these videos and reading books, you will find yourself continuously, accidentally opting in to more toxic people, where in the beginning you thought you were safe, but later on you realize again you found yourself in what you called another toxic relationship where you will call that person a narcissist. But remember, in the beginning, it always feels like it's just right. So then you wonder, where did it go wrong? What did I do? What did I miss? The bad bitch is a master in human power dynamics. In order to understand why you experience the things that you did in these relationships and why you continue to, you must understand human power dynamics. It begins there, and you must know how to adjust your conduct to embody power. The main difference between the good girl and the bad bitch is how you embody power. The good girl is reactive, the bad bitch is responsive. The good girl thinks that is a one-size-fits-all solution. The bad bitch understands that humans are complex and nuanced. To understand human power dynamics, you have to acknowledge that there are 3 man-made power hierarchies that rule the world. That is capitalism, patriarchy, and racism. And how and why somebody acts like a narcissist in a given situation is 100% relational. Meaning, if you've been in awareness for a while, you will notice that somebody that was narcissistic towards you will be a total pleaser in a different situation. This is because relationships are situational, based on capitalism, patriarchy, and racism, and where that person fits in terms of the spectrum of privilege, and where you fit in terms of the spectrum of privilege. You always want to make sure that you keep yourself in an advantageous position. Let's go back to capitalism, patriarchy, and racism. Capitalism is really about who has more capitalistic advantage. Simply put, it's wealth and money, but also other things that we consider assets that enable us to make more money. Let's say different kinds of networks that we can tap into. So capitalism is tied to relationships as well. Family background is strongly tied to capitalism, as well as other monetizable assets, skills, knowledge, and certain social advantages, like having beauty advantage, for example, pretty privilege, which then leads us into patriarchy. It's a gray line how all of these power dynamic hierarchies are tied together. In patriarchy, it's really about what types of qualities and lifestyle choices that you make that are considered better or more advantageous in a patriarchal structure. Male and female beauty standards are both under patriarchy in terms of power dynamics. So if you fit into those stereotypical beauty standards, then you have more advantage. People like you more, you have more opportunities, you're considered more charismatic, which again, it ties into capitalism. Looking at marital status, a traditional family is considered more advantageous. Single mother homes or LGBTQ plus families and relationships are considered less advantageous. Just think about the scrutiny somebody faces when their sexual orientation or life choices do not reflect the patriarchal standard. These people invite more counter forces, as well as other people will see those in these situations as less advantageous and target them as they see that as a weakness. A lot of times people try to take advantage of those who are considered to be in vulnerable situations. Now let's talk about race. Needless to say, we know which race is considered superior. White supremacy, which also ties into beauty standards, which also ties into capitalism. So we've got the white male at the top of the privilege. Not all white males will believe or agree that they are privileged, perhaps because they had capitalistic disadvantages or because they come from a family that does not hold a lot of power. But when a white male walks into a building, regardless of what his background has been, he will have more advantage, gain respect, people will give him benefit of the doubt a lot faster, and doors will open for him with much more effortlessness than somebody who doesn't have that combination of background. Now that you understand privilege, you have to look at yourself and the person in question who you consider narcissist from this context. When somebody is abusing their privilege towards you, it's because they think they can get away with it. They think that they're better than you, and they think that their rights are more important than yours. You are less deserving of human rights and advantages. That is the baseline of what narcissistic abuse is, while it is a combination of these privileges. So the narcissist that you have in mind will have a combination of superiority complex when it comes to the different aspects in capitalism, patriarchy, and racism. This is why we see more narcissists who are male of all colors and backgrounds. Wherever there is strong patriarchy in a culture, in those cultures, male narcissism skyrockets and is accepted as the norm. Capitalistic abuse, in many parts of the world, you can get away with murder if you have money. We also hear of wealthy people paying off their crimes or to silence somebody all the time. We hear this in celebrity culture with big-time entrepreneurs. Then there's a nuance of race. Let's use stories because it'll make it easier to understand. Let's say there's an Asian female and a white male, and they're in a relationship. First of all, the white male has societal advantage. So he may feel that his needs are more important and his human rights are more important than hers. This story changes if the Asian female is more wealthy or her family has a lot more power than his family. The story also changes if she has more fame or she's really well known. She has a social advantage, which is very important. Let's say that she even has beauty privilege, so pretty privilege in the most traditional sense, whereas the man is just meh, mid, so-so. I often see people wondering how come this beautiful woman is dating this man who is less than average looking, who isn't even wealthy. It's because in this partnership, the two people have measured up their power dynamics and privilege on the scale and somehow have found some kind of equilibrium where they could kind of make it work. If there is too much of a power imbalance between the two people, this dynamic can easily turn into what you call narcissistic abuse. You may think that a white man is the only one capable of abusing a woman, while this may be easy. As in, it is very easy for a man to slut shame a woman in public. It is very easy for a man to make a woman look like a bad mother. The world loves to ride on that train. So yes, it could become narcissistic abuse that way, but she also has power that she can leverage to attack him. This is why we often see some people who consider themselves as victims of narcissistic abuse actually wonder if they themselves are the narcissist. What is actually going on here is that the person who considers themselves as a victim is contemplating and trying to make sense out of their fight to have advantage in this power dynamic. Ultimately, the person who takes more damage is considered the victim. But this is also why when we're speaking about healing from these types of relationships, victimization is not the answer. We have to look at it from the perspective of privilege and power dynamics. And the best thing you can do if you are in this situation is to find ways to gain power back without triggering the many counterforces that you may be surrounded by. Now let's look at a second example. I'm gonna use an example of a woman. She was a white woman who decided to date a black man who was also much younger than her. She thought this was a way that she could have some equality in the relationship based on the difficulties that she faced in the past. This ended up being the worst, she called, narcissistic abuse experience that she had ever experienced. Way worse than what she had with her own white male figure, which is her father. When we break this down, it's very clear. She thought because she was a white woman that she had more advantage than she actually had. What mattered more in this dynamic was patriarchy entitlement. Her mindset had already been weakened by her family upbringing, who were extreme Christians, and patriarchy was embedded into her to be submissive. She had already done a lot of things in the relationship where she gave away her power. And the man, who also came from a strong patriarchal background, took full advantage of that. When we looked at all the different levels of abuse, she had given away financial control. She never thought that he could do this because he was younger, so she had ageism and assumed that she had an advantage when she didn't. She also thought that being white would protect her from a black man and his potential patriarchal privilege abuse. She thought that having more money than him as she was older, had more time to accumulate wealth, that would prevent it too. But none of it actually mattered. It all had to do with her mindset and how much she had given away power in this dynamic. And by the time they were 3-4 months into their relationship, he held all the power and she was being strung along. Eventually, after about 2 years of the relationship, she had made the worst move. She gave him 50% of the business that she founded before they met. Detangling this situation was the biggest headache of all. She was in a place where she could no longer put boundaries that she needed. She was so desensitized that she did not even realize that she was being breached, oppressed, and abused in this relationship. She went right back to the dynamic of what was familiar for her in her childhood home with a man who's not her father but acted way worse than him, propelled by the assumption that because of his race, he would be different. This is exactly how the good girl thinks. She thinks in very black and white terms. And if you don't want to experience what you call narcissistic abuse anymore, you need to become nuanced. You have to realize that humans are humans and they're wild cards. What works on one person doesn't work on everybody. You need to stop taking your limited experiences and using it as absolute blueprints on how you deal with all relationships. This is why you keep getting into more narcissistic abuse situations. Here is one more example. A brown woman was working with a black woman. You think with two women of color, this is gonna be a pretty fair situation when it comes to power dynamics, but you're wrong. The black woman had more money. She had more privilege. She was also considered more beautiful and more popular. So in this corporate setting and dynamic, even though the brown woman was slightly more senior, the black woman had more advantage. So then the narcissistic abuse begins towards the brown woman, and the brown woman sees herself as a victim. The black woman was determined and very, very career driven. She was gonna do whatever it takes to advance, and that included surpassing the brown woman. Initially, the brown woman thought that the black woman would be her peer, her colleague, her ally. She made a lot of assumptions based on her race and race only. She did not pay attention to this woman's actions. She even felt uncomfortable bringing up certain types of problems relating to work projects when it came to this black woman's performance, because she felt uncomfortable to address a black woman's mistakes, because what black women have to face every single day in this world. When I told a brown woman that this was actually in fact racism, you're treating her differently because she's black, you're not teaching her, you're not holding her accountable just as you do with white women or white men in your team, she was flabbergasted that I call this racism. And eventually this relationship developed into a dynamic where the brown woman had to quit her job. The good girl refuses to listen to good advice. And there was nothing I could say to this brown woman to smarten up, to look at her shadows, which cost her her job, not to mention her wellness. Hopefully the term narcissistic abuse makes more sense to you now, and why sometimes you think that you have overcome it and then you're right back into the same dynamic of suffering. Yet again, dealing with a narcissist in your romantic life, in your corporate or business life. Become the bad bitch who's a master in human relationships. Learn to embody power. Read my new release, Bad Bitch on Top, to get started and join our free community. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to this video for more helpful videos like this, and see you in my next one.